Welcome to the Sustainability Business Podcast, a show bringing conversations to the community shaping the future of energy and sustainability. Be sure to join us on LinkedIn and learn about the innovative solutions that are turning the tide towards a more sustainable future for all.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Plourde from Schneider Electric. Welcome to the Unstuck podcast, where we aim to uncover some of the most common roadblocks that organizations encounter along their sustainability journeys. So often, clients come to us with sustainability goals or even publicly announced targets in place with little idea on how they're going to achieve them. And each year, they fall just a little bit further behind in making progress. At Schneider Electric, we call this the ambition to impact gap. And we've helped companies all around the globe address this challenge. So this podcast series aims to showcase real-life client stories where we'll share insights on how we've helped bridge that gap from stuck to unstuck in helping our clients achieve both sustainability and business goals. And if you're feeling stuck in your company's sustainability journey, please know that you are not alone. In fact, recent research by think tank Climate Impact Partners reveals that about 90% of Fortune 500 companies are not on track to reach their targets. And this is a very interesting dynamic to me because we know how to do this sustainability thing. And for the most part, we have the technology to decarbonize. So the question is, why are so many companies struggling? With that said, joining me today are Phillippe and Dave Kramer, both sustainability experts from Schneider Electric. And today we're going to dive into some industry-specific challenges from the food and beverage industry. We're going to share some of the insights of the strategies that Schneider used to help one client in particular kind of accelerate action across their global portfolio and get them back on track to drive sustainability results. So welcome to you both. And I'd love to dive in and start with you, Dave Kramer. Let's start by kind of just introducing this client. We're not going to use their name, but what we will say is this is a global food and bev manufacturer. And I'm sure almost all of our listeners on this podcast will say that they have enjoyed their product at least once or twice. So before we dive into the details, let's introduce this client and a little bit about their sustainability ambitions.
Great. Well, first, Kate, thanks for having us on. So as you noted, this client's a global leader in the food and beverage sector with several plants across multiple continents. And our group's engagement with them originally started through a pilot project in Europe. And the success there prompted a broader rollout to North America. And David and I then worked with key North American stakeholders to build out our energy as a service program and the framework for that, with the client's primary objectives being driving cost savings, improving KPIs, modernizing infrastructure, and critically, augmenting and advancing their sustainability efforts. Mm-hmm. So more specifically, from a sustainability perspective, their commitments are driven by science-based targets. Their original goal was to reduce carbon emissions by 25% across the value chain by 2025. Based on their strong progress toward that 2025 goal and desire for greater climate action, they've since set a loftier target to achieve net zero across the value chain by 2040. And this ambition was driven by their commitment to reduce emissions in line with the goals of the Paris Agreement. And where this really impacts David and I in particular, as an interim step, the client's aiming to be carbon neutral at their production facilities by 2030.
Those are really impressive goals, and I would say this is a great illustration of a company that has sustainability goals. They are a consumer-facing company, so they want their brand to be showcased as a sustainable brand because they know more customers are desiring that. But they also have very specific business goals associated with their sustainability program. And I think, to kind of put the bottom line up front in this is that when sustainability is done right, it pays, and not just in sustainability, I would say progress, but also in financial and business performance. So that's a great example. So Dave, that begs the question. Those were great goals, very strategic. They clearly had a very well articulated ambition of what they wanted to achieve and why. what were some of the challenges? Why did they get stuck?
That's a great question. And I think they share this with multiple companies who have set these sustainability targets. And ultimately, the answer is that there's multiple factors involved. A few of the main ones that jumped out, I'll first start with financial limitations to actually develop and execute their sustainability strategy. So prior to our involvement, this client was executing projects, really internally driven projects that are limited by CapEx constraints. Typically, CapEx projects require very short paybacks, low hurdle rates to even receive funding. On top of that, there are competing priorities for a very limited amount of that funding. So it's difficult purely from a CapEx perspective to make a substantial impact. The next challenge that jumps to mind, organizational complexity. So gaining alignment is difficult to do with these large global organizations when you have corporate, regional, and site level stakeholders all involved. Add to that, though, that it takes a wide variety of roles across each of those levels, including procurement, operations, engineering, sustainability, finance, legal, and even executives. So when you have that many stakeholders, true leadership and governance become hurdles if they're not carefully planned out. And I guess the last thing on the organizational side, you can have disconnects and varying motivations between the business and operational sides that put the sustainability ambitions in a difficult spot. The last challenge that I'll touch on, deploying these solutions at pace and scale, it is reasonable to make a significant impact, say at one facility, two facilities, but when you're dealing with these large global clients that have dozens of sites globally, it's hard to do in part because of the first two challenges I mentioned, but there's also a technical component that comes into play. So there's complexity in identifying the right technologies that are not only impactful enough to reach their sustainability targets, but are also applicable across different plants with varying systems and operational conditions. So this ultimately requires a team of experts that have deep knowledge across a wide range of solutions and are capable then of engineering, designing, and implementing those solutions without disruption to production.
So it sounds like this company struggled with what I call three of the big five. And when I talk to consulting teams around the globe, the big five, when it comes to obstacles, again, they're usually not around technology. They're often around making that first investment decision or making that first plan. It's often around governance, to your point, around all these different stakeholders that need to be aligned and on board. A lot of times it has to do with funding. It sounds like that was another big challenge for them since they did have a really significant ambition to accomplish. The other that you didn't mention, but is often something I hear is around visibility across the portfolio, having data to make smart decisions. And last, sounds like it was a big issue for this company, is that actually implementation piece, right? That scaling piece that you talked about and that speed piece. Even having the best plan, we see clients often that then are unable to implement for kind of some of the reasons we mentioned: governance, financial, lack of alignment between enterprise and site. So it sounds like this client had a number of those obstacles that were challenging to them. With that said, David, let's maybe talk a little bit about how this company came to partner with Schneider Electric. And I just intentionally use the word partner because especially in a manufacturing environment, this is a true partnership. So I'd love you to talk a little bit about how they found us and kind of why we were the right partner for them.
Yeah, sure thing. So one of the, I guess, key drivers for us to really enable our engagement with North America was an introduction through some counterparts that we have in Europe who were developing a pilot site there to drive towards carbon neutrality at a facility. And there was great success with that pilot project. And, North America really wanted to learn more and find out some of the ways and the levers that were being leveraged to drive, a pilot site. Maybe they could, hop in on that. So we were introduced to North American leadership. We talked to them, regularly. We spent an extensive amount of time and effort really trying to understand really what their goals were. We already knew what their global goals were, but I think more importantly, we needed to understand, what journey had they already been navigating to drive towards those goals, and then ensure that we could adjust and sort of tailor our framework to theirs, make sure we understood each other's terminologies, and then from there, we wanted to really try to become that trusted partner. So we determined that a next probable step for us was to select our own pilot site. And really allow us to kind of showcase our skills in identifying opportunities at this facility, leveraging what the company had already produced, and sort of a global playbook, if you will, of technologies that could be potential drivers to meeting their goals. We worked pretty tirelessly to really help them think about different ways of doing things. So we had to really rally them on their side to, set up meetings with people in finance and control to make sure that we could leverage energy as a service, to meet their needs, because we knew they didn't have, the CapEx sources that were necessary.
I'd love to dig into this concept of global playbook, because this is something that I hear time and again as kind of a little bit of the secret sauce. A lot of times global companies have in their portfolio kind of bundles of like sites. And sometimes those like sites are disconnected from a visibility standpoint. So they might have sites with similar manufacturing lines, but they don't quite know how to benchmark against each other. So this idea of this kind of global playbook where we pilot at a site and then we kind of find other like sites where we can kind of go fast and scale, to Dave's point, I think is a really interesting concept. Obviously, this is a client that came in with a very specific and robust plan. Execution was something that they really needed help with. Was that kind of test and scale something that was an important part of moving them forward?
Absolutely. I mean, it was our approach from right out of the gate was to, take the work that they'd already done and then make some adjustment to it, try to understand, how do they come up with this playbook? Do we see, based on our expertise, that these technologies can work? Can they work within the model that we're bringing them, the financial model? And then are they going to work well with different factors for each site? So that they can be robust across the portfolio. So we had a really good groundwork to work from.
Okay, so Dave, one of the things that David mentioned is around this concept of energy as a service. I think financial enablement is kind of a term that we use, is another really big obstacle. There are many times when sustainability teams kind of struggle to be able to make a business case to their C-level, to their CFO that kind of passes that CFO sniff test, to be able to get past a OpEx kind of plan, which really only can tackle maybe low-hanging fruit type of projects. And so I'd love for you to speak a little bit more about this concept of energy as a service. I think it's kind of a nascent model in the market, but something we see is going to become a more important, I would say, tool in the tool basket of companies looking to finance and fund long-term and very comprehensive sustainability plans. So can you talk a little bit more about that model and why that was kind of a tool that helped them kind of accelerate?
So energy as a service can mean different things to different people and different companies. So I want to acknowledge that at first, but the way that our group leverages it, really, it provides an alternative to traditional construction and CapEx projects. And why companies are finding energy as a service attractive, a couple main reasons. First, it provides that flexibility to go beyond just a few year payback to term lengths, 10, 15, and up to 20 years, depending on the project and the economics. But that allows companies the financial flexibility to go much deeper while still having savings and maintenance pay for the cost of the project and the financing of the project. So it's still economically attractive and viable, but just affords companies that longer view to be more impactful and go deeper with technologies that otherwise wouldn't have met that traditional CapEx hurdle rate. The other thing that's attractive, this is not traditional borrowing. And so as long as the proper accounting rules are followed, energy as a service should be an off-balance sheet solution. So it does not hit as debt on the books, which is critical for almost any partner that we talk to in the private sector.
Interesting. That is really interesting. David, I want to switch back to you for a minute. We were talking a little bit about kind of some of the unique expertise that Schneider utilized with this client. And one of the areas, as I mentioned, often is one of those big 5 obstacles is the ability to implement. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about maybe the kind of the project management that Schneider Electric brought to this project that helped them kind of build momentum in that implementation stage.
I think the key is finding the right technology to really meet the demands of the specific process, So for this client in the beverage space, we really had to take a pretty deep dive into, some building up of a model, if you will, of what the operating characteristics of the facility are, so that we could understand really where we could go attack from a decarbonization perspective. These are really critical steps, at the onset of an assessment. So technology assessment, I think, is pretty critical for us to kind of hone in, like I said, and understand how do we apply the technology, what are the risks associated with them, what gains do we get? And then, follow on to that is really having a good understanding of, how do we implement these types of projects? So really assessing, are there space constraints? Are there existing infrastructure constraints that we have to work with? And then having proper manufacturer partners, design partners to help us with the specific industry that we're working in, to really understand the challenges that we might come across with regards to augmenting, a facility's from where they were coming from. And so I think those are some of the key things that we really try to focus on when it comes to, execution. I think maybe lastly here is really kind of considering, like I just mentioned about adding maybe some benefits to a facility. So sometimes when you look at technologies such as electrification, they can actually boost resiliency with regards to redundancy, in a specific process within a facility. And this was the case here with this opportunity where, we were going to look at thermal decarbonization, leaving those existing assets in place as redundancy to an electrified solution. So we were seeing a lot of benefits from that, and really it takes a holistic approach and some time working with site stakeholders to really develop the full picture.
So there's a lot there I want to unpack with you. We are a global manufacturer ourselves at Schneider Electric. We know that manufacturing processes and lines are, so important. And one of the things you talked about was really kind of partnering with those folks to not only choose the right technology that would enhance and not maybe interrupt their manufacturing processes and productivity, but you also talked about bringing in kind of experts outside of Schneider Electric to kind of bring in special expertise. And I think that's something really unique about the programs that we do. We're, very, I would say, comprehensive in nature, right? And this goes back to that element of partnership, right? Where we do this ourselves for our own company. So we know how important it is to choose the right things. One of the things I'd love you to comment on specifically is the electrification of the manufacturing processes. I mean, this is something that even 5 years ago, the attitude was, this is so energy intensive, we can't electrify these processes. But now, fast forward, we're doing it. Talk a little bit about maybe the decisions that were made to feel confident in making those choices.
Yeah, sure. So I think a positive here with this client specifically was they were already 100% renewable, right on scope emissions, and so we wanted to leverage that. That was a primary driver for us, and I think thankfully in the world we live today, there are a lot more commercially available technologies such as industrial heat pumps, that can be leveraged to really match and offset traditionally driven processes that require steam or hot water. And this was the case for us here, where we knew we had a renewable source to switch to. Existing infrastructure really helped us electrically. And then applying that technology with the manufacturer in a partnership approach built a lot of trust. It really helped us be able to feel very confident that we were approaching this process specifically with the technology that made a lot of sense. And I think, just to go back a little bit, I think the key driver here is that technologies are now more prevalent, especially in the United States, where we're still probably behind in some ways, but we can reach to various manufacturers that now have presence in the U.S. to help us make these types of challenging projects possible and make them financially attractive.
The other statement that you made was around resiliency, that sometimes the technologies and the programs that we're doing have benefits beyond decarbonization, one being resiliency. And I think this is so important for two reasons. One is, I think it's really interesting that when you two are kind of on site with a client, you're not just thinking about decarbonization. You are thinking about kind of every aspect of their energy management and sustainability program. So you're thinking about, how do we minimize unexpected downtime? How do we reduce risk from maybe climate impact? These are things that are becoming, I would say, bigger factors for company in their future planning. And I think when sustainability is done well and done comprehensively, and again, we're a manufacturer, so we think about these things for ourselves day in and day out, it can really contribute to the company's overall success. So, not just like, again, this is a food and bev company. They obviously have ambitions around building a sustainable brand, but they're also thinking about these things like boosting resilience, like minimizing downtime, reducing operational risk, reducing cost. And those are all performance factors that projects like this can address. So maybe you can just speak a little bit more about kind of the holistic nature and the holistic approach of some projects like this.
Yeah, so I think what we find is that obviously clients have invested a great deal in their facilities with older technologies, and they're very tried and true. And for them to transition completely away from that, it introduces risks. And we want to try to mitigate those risks. So for this project specifically and this client, leveraging a technology like industrial heat pumps really can allow us to have existing infrastructure remain in place. We complement the design with this new technology, and then this provides an extra layer of redundancy that not only gives, confidence in the ability to drive uptime of equipment, but confidence in that there really is a fail-safe. And this also provides us a comfort as well, because now that we're providing some level of performance guarantee within the program to the client, they have the ability to fall back, right, to what they know can work. And so really it's kind of a unique opportunity. I don't know that all technologies provide that necessarily, but most do, because we're decarbonizing thermal solutions that are traditionally gas driven, and those can remain in place because natural gas is still going to remain a source for many companies in the near term to drive production. So hopefully that gives you some sense of what we're seeing in the marketplace.
Great, thank you. You used the word confidence, and that brings me to our last topic. And Dave, I'm going to switch over to you because I think another area where companies maybe are feeling a little bit unconfident is around the complexities and the changing landscape of sustainability policy and stimulus programs. Both here and in the US and globally, our companies have really struggled to read the tea leaves, to feel like they were in a place where they could make investment decisions. And in some cases, I feel like this really has led to maybe inaction. Maybe them saying, yeah, maybe it's safer just to take a wait and see approach rather than kind of go forward right now and kind of be the leader. I'd love for you to talk, Dave, a little bit about how this company navigated the complexities of the current policy and stimulus landscape, and maybe how they felt about making some decisions kind of during these very disruptive times.
Sure. So this is an important topic because the reality is for many companies, it is extremely difficult to align sustainability goals with business objectives. These outside funding streams can go a long way in removing financial barriers to implementation. So leveraging grants, tax credits, incentives is often critical to supporting decarbonization ambitions in a fiscally responsible manner. So regarding the changing political landscape, I think simply it's important to be prepared for the shifts in policy and those changes, as that's not always a bad thing. That can often present great opportunities. And the Schneider Electric team partnered with our client to support them through our in-house dedicated team that monitors both state and federal level programs, so that when they do become available, we're amongst the first to know and understand the details and be available to them as a resource for grant writing, application administration, and general guidance in securing those funds. And we've had a lot of success in doing that at both the state and federal level. The state opportunities really vary across those state lines, but some significant programs out there in New York, in Colorado, that we've had great success with, applied directly to these electrification and decarbonization strategies. And also at the federal level, I understand, those programs can come and go fairly rapidly. That's why it's important to be ready to take action. But one that we're helping with currently is the 48C tax credits, and the idea for our current client that where we've had success with this particular case study and the ambition that exists to roll that out more broadly across their North American portfolio, 48C tax credits really would go a long way in helping fund these, capital intensive types of projects where, utility rates can vary site by site and pose different challenges. So, the changing landscape is one to keep an eye on, and it's important to have a partner that's ready to help you navigate that.
Yeah. And, you said tax credits. My eye started to twitch a little bit. I got to be honest with you. But I think the takeaways are work with somebody who knows about all the opportunities that you would be eligible for, and have some shovel-ready projects ready to go, because it has been such a disruptive landscape of money being put out, not having great criteria around what you need to do to apply or be selected. So I think it's an incredibly complex thing that I know we're going to continue to monitor on behalf of our clients, but definitely having that plan and that kind of shovel-ready execution plan lets you be a whole lot more agile to be able to take advantage of some of these opportunities. So that's really good advice.
If I could piggyback off of that, just for one final comment on the topic, it's one of the reasons that taking a programmatic approach has a lot of value. So if you're working too siloed and are focused just on a specific facility, it's difficult to be able to translate that more broadly across a portfolio when these opportunities present themselves. So one thing that we did right off the bat with this client, while we identified pilot sites and we're strategic in picking off sites kind of one or two at a time, we knew enough about the broader portfolio, the consumption profiles, things of that nature, that we could, when opportunities like 48C present themselves, be able to submit and apply for all of the facilities and take those lessons learned and leverage that playbook concept across all of the sites.
That's great. That's a great programmatic approach. That's another, I think, kind of secret sauce element of what makes clients who have a long-term program and project and goal successful. So let's bring this home, the ambition to impact gap and kind of this concept of getting unstuck. We talked about some of those big hurdles that we hear. Certainly with this client, you heard a lot about financial enablement and being able to kind of overcome that hurdle. We talked a lot about governance and the complexities of a global portfolio, of aligning enterprise level ambitions with site level realities, especially in manufacturing facilities. And we also talked about how hard it is to implement across sites. And again, especially in manufacturing facilities where, to David's point, every site has different technology needs and kind of manufacturing criteria that they need to be thinking about. Those are some big challenges that this client faced and that you two are helping them overcome. But I'd love to maybe close out for our listeners and just, a little bit more in general, think about the lessons learned from working with this and other clients that you would kind of use as takeaways for them and how we're helping companies progress in their sustainability journey.
I think the important thing that jumps out to me, if a company hears this and they're having a hard time getting started, being more impactful, it's important to get the right people together, both internally and externally. Mm-hmm. So that includes your partners, and to go slow up front to be able to go fast later. Yes. I can't stress the importance of building the right framework of a program and understanding the objectives, taking the time to think through the goals, involving the right people from accounting and legal, and setting up that framework so that once you've identified the right technologies and build the business cases, it's easy to move at pace and scale like we touched on earlier.
Yeah, I think I joked when we were preparing for this call, like sustainability, it takes a village, right? It takes so many different disciplines to plan, to execute, to fund, all those things. So that's great advice for sure. David, what about you? Any lesson learned, from, I would say, the execution side that you feel are so important?
Yeah, I think having a flexible mindset to the task, it can be very arduous to, like we've talked about, finding the right technologies, managing the appropriate risks. I think this just takes some flexibility in all parties' parts. And so if you're not, at that, I guess, more programmatic approach, it can feel, I think, more challenging on a per site basis to really accomplish this. So getting the, I guess, top-down approach really helps when you want to drive more scalable approaches to, driving impact. And so I think having flexibility, being willing to invite somebody like Schneider to the table to bring the not only expertise, but the know-how, the technology, selection piece, that implementation piece that we've talked about can really, I think, drive those results that many are looking for.
Yeah. And back to the concept of it takes a village, it's also really nice to have one point of accountability, which, I'm sure your client has you both on speed dial for anything that they need. But I think it's really important to have somebody looking at these projects very holistically, right? And very comprehensively, even though it's a complex portfolio, having one client, especially one that kind of does this for their own global portfolio, to kind of look at it holistically and make sure that performance is on track, that we're able to scale at speed, to David's earlier point, is so important. So thank you to you both for sharing this client story with us today. I really do appreciate it. And I know this client is already accelerating in their journey, which is fantastic to see. And we have, I would say, many more phases of work that we're hoping to help them with in the near future. So that's fantastic. I want to leave you with this. It is very easy to get stuck. But it also is very possible to get unstuck and make great progress on this very complex topic. So to learn more about what we do at Schneider Electric and to read more of our client stories, visit us online at www.perspectives.se.com. That's perspectives with an S.se.com. And stay tuned for our next Unstuck story coming up soon. We'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Sustainability Business Podcast. We hope you've been inspired by the Trailblazers and their innovative solutions for a more sustainable future. Be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn to stay engaged and informed. Together, we can be the change makers our planet needs.